Today, my guest is Professor Sharon Alvarez. I will keep my introduction short to maximize our time with her. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Sharon as a person. Professor Alvarez is a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally is a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. For the sake of time, I will skip many of her accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. Professor Alvarez is elected to the Board of Governors of the Academy of Management in 2020. She is currently the Vice President-elect and Program Chair at AOM, and she will serve as President in 2023. She is past Chair of Entrepreneurship Division of AOM and was the 2015 Denver Program Chair for SMS. She served AMR and SEJ at various editorial positions, and her research on entrepreneurship and management has strongly impacted IB and international entrepreneurship. She received AOM Entrepreneurship Division's Foundational Paper Award and SEJ's Best Paper Award in 2019. She was a runner-up for the Informs Award and received the Journal of Management's Best Paper Award. Her work in Journal of Management is the 27th most cited article in the last 50 years. Thank you, Sharon, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So I feel like I have a bit of an insider track because of you and Osla in some ways, you know?
Thank you. Sharon, first question. What did you want to become when you were a child?
So this is sort of a funny story. I wanted to be a pediatrician. And the reason it's funny for two reasons. I'll give you the first one and then the second one, and you'll see how they're related. But the first one is, I actually don't like children that well. Like, I like them in small doses, and I like to see other people's children, and I like to buy them baby gifts and that type of thing. But in large doses, they get on my nerves. And so I like dogs much better. But I couldn't become a veterinarian for one of the same reasons why I couldn't become a pediatrician. I actually hate blood. And I hate like body parts, and I hate like gross things, right? So all that I would have liked to have done, I cannot do. So I thought about it very logically, and I thought, well, I don't want to have to rely on anybody for my support. I want to make sure I'm always financially independent. I think that's extremely important for women. So I thought, well, a business degree it is. And that was why I did my undergraduate degree in business. So I have all business degrees. I have more business degrees than you've ever seen. But I hated accounting. Oh my God, I hated accounting so bad. And I love things like sociology. I mean, to me, these things were just so interesting, like sociology and political science. I loved all those classes. And then my business classes, especially accounting. Oh, it was so hard for me, but I knew I could make money with a business degree. I knew.
Sharon, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Denver, Colorado.
Can you remember the first moment of awareness between domestic versus international?
I was always aware. So even though I grew up in Denver, Colorado, my parents immigrated to the United States from Cuba. And I swear, like, nobody knew what a Cuban was, where Cuba was. Like Denver, Colorado, like when I grew up, and I'm not going to give you the dates because it dates me way too much, but Denver, Colorado truly was, I think the population was maybe, a couple 100,000 or something. I mean, it was just truly very much, it was rural, it was a smaller city, and nobody knew. So everybody, of course, always thought I was Mexican, right? And they had because they understood, they knew what Mexico was and what Mexicans, but they had no idea what Cubans were. So nobody knew what Cubans were. But I went to Cuba very young. My mother was extremely ill, and she was hospitalized for a long 6 months or so. She had gallbladder surgery, which today is nothing, but back when she had it, she almost died from it.
Hmm.
And my father couldn't care for me because he had to work. So they sent me to stay with my grandparents. I stayed with my grandparents for 6 months. Um, and when I got to Cuba, I didn't speak any English. And when I came back to the United States, I didn't speak, or when I got to Cuba, I didn't speak any Spanish.
Spanish.
When I came back to the United States, I didn't speak any English. So, so it was so from a very young age, I always had this sense of there is a difference, right? And there was a difference in me. I was somehow not quite like all the other kids in my block that, had Campbell's soup and cheese sandwiches for lunch.
Okay, something that is not on your CV that people might find interesting.
So I'm actually quite an exercise fiend. And I don't think people realize that about me. I did body pump, which uses weights. I like classes, but I did body pump all through, for a full decade until I got really bored of it. Today, I still do Pilates 3 times a week. I lift weights twice a week, and I walk the dog 2 miles every day. So I'm quite an exercise fiend. People don't realize that.
Okay, if you stop doing what you're doing today, what's the second best alternative career path for you?
I've actually been thinking about that. I've been thinking, is there an alternative life for me after academia? And I think I would like to argue for not human rights, animal rights. And I love animals. As I said, I've always loved dogs. And sometimes, as human beings, we do horrible things anyhow, even to other human beings, but we're very cruel to animals and oftentimes consider them just things. And so I've thought I'd like to get a law degree, not because I want to necessarily be a lawyer, but because I think it would help me in championing animal rights.
Regrets. Have you got any regrets?
No, none. Given the cards that I was dealt in life, I have done the absolute best that I could for what I had. So I have no regrets, none whatsoever. I guess if you were to ask me if I think there's a regret, it's that I can't live a second life all over again.
Interesting. What was your biggest failure and what did you learn from
it? So this is where my entrepreneurship training comes in. If you're learning from something, it's never a failure, right? Because how can you fail if you learned? So I did struggle a lot because many of the ideas that I was pushing as a very young academic were kind of novel and they weren't mainstream. And I was at a fairly mainstream university. I was at Ohio State, which is, they publish a lot and they publish in the mainstream journals a lot. And so, I really struggled to get my stuff published. And, I got some very interesting insights along the way from many people. But some that are expected, and I'll touch on some of the faculty and stuff at Ohio State in a second, but some from people that I wasn't quite expecting it from. One was from someone, and I remember at the time thinking, you just don't get it, because it was from someone who wasn't an academic, but they worked in the university setting. And they said, you just are going to have to figure out how to make your stuff mainstream. And I remember thinking, that's so easy for you to say. You have no idea. What do you know? You know nothing, right? But that actually turned out to be a very profound statement because this person was right. And then the other person that gave me an insight, and they're not like a super well-known academic either. in fact, they're not an academic at all, was with the SEJ paper. The SEJ paper had actually, it was rejected from AMR, which is so interesting in retrospect, because it has probably done well. Various discussions of the paper have done well in AMR and at Academy. And so when SEJ launched and I was working on the paper, Jay was actually the one who was invited to submit a paper, and he wanted to submit that paper. And so I was thinking about, what do we submit, and do we make it better, and do we change it, and what do we do? And someone, again, a non-academic, said to me, "Do you like the paper?" And I said, "I do." And they said, "Do you like it even though it was rejected from AMR?" And I said, "I do. I like it a lot." And they said, "Then don't change it. Just send it in the way it is." And again, Jay and I had worked on the paper a lot. I mean, so it's not like it was underdeveloped. It's just we couldn't get anyone to buy into it. And I thought, that's right. If SEJ doesn't like it, let's let them tell us. And so we submitted it exactly like what was rejected from AMR. And two things happened that I knew it was going to be a really big paper. Up until that point, and I was a very young assistant professor, right? I mean, this paper basically got invited into SEJ because of Jay. But when I walked into the launch of SEJ, Dan Schindel knew who I was. And up until that point, he probably had seen me 1,000 times and had no clue who I was. But when I walked into that launch, he knew who I was. And I knew instantly the reason he knows who I am, he likes the paper. I just knew it. And I was right on that. And then, of course, when Jay presented the paper, the room exploded. The whole SEJ, that whole launch conference, oh my God. And poor Jay, I mean, Howard Aldridge came up to me afterwards. He was there too. And he said to me, he goes, "I just want you to know that this isn't normal," right? and poor Jay. Jay was like, "I don't know if I want to keep doing this. I'm tired of fighting battles, But that was the first of many battles. And Dan Schindel made that the lead paper. And from the very, very beginning, he recognized that paper, and he liked that paper a lot.
Sometimes some great papers have great stories, and this is one of them. This is quite interesting. Okay, what are you most proud of?
I guess I'm proud of lots of things. I am proud of the career I've had. I've had a very, very good career, and I wouldn't have anticipated it. Had you ever asked me, if I was going to have the career that I've had, I wouldn't have anticipated it. So I'm happy for that. I'm happy that it unfolded the way it unfolded. I'm proud of the papers, all the papers in different variations, and of course I'm really proud of the papers, the series, the Discovery Creation series. There's 3 of them, really. There's the one in SEJ, there's one in Org Science, and then there's one in Annals that kind of also did the review. And so that series of the 3 papers, and that Jay and I both worked on very, very hard. And but I'm incredibly proud of those 3 papers because they were so profound.
Thank you.
Another paper though that I'm proud of, and it's kind of an interesting story. It's actually my most cited paper, and sometimes people don't realize this, but it is the JOM paper. And Lowell Busnitz and I worked on that paper together, and that paper's done incredibly well over the years. And I wouldn't have predicted that, but here we are.
I mean, related, I want to ask you my first opening question for the research segment. Let's say you're stranded on the side of the road and you go to this pub and there are locals who don't know your research. How do you explain your research to people who don't read academic papers or your research specifically? And how do you explain the importance of your papers?
Mm. So, the first thing is you are responsible for your life, and your actions change your life and they change the life of others around you, right? So that's the profound thing about creation, right? About the creation view, is that the actions of the entrepreneurs those are the actions that change the environment, that shape the environment, that shape the opportunities, right? So the implications of it are actually quite profound. And in fact, part of why I think for me, and I think for Jay as well, although I'll let him answer that on his own, but for me, again, being the child of immigrants, had I accepted that I was the child of immigrants and that all the things they say about children of immigrants, right? That we struggle at this and we struggle at that, and we struggle at, right? I mean, the literature is kind of sad. If I had accepted the world as given, life would suck. But I didn't, right? And I, from the beginning, certainly not to change the world, but certainly to change my life. And that's what entrepreneurs do. They change their life and they change other lives. And in the process, they change the environment.
Sharon, I want to ask two related questions about the field, international business, international entrepreneurship. First, what's the next 5 to 10 years of this research? What's the next big question? And what are some of the omitted areas, variables that we should talk about?
So I don't know what the next big question is, right? So that's for somebody much smarter than me to predict, I think. But I will say that, I'm working on a paper with an assistant professor right now on women entrepreneurs in Ghana. And it is fascinating to me because we've taken a rationality view and even a bounded rationality view. And we're bringing in the notions of culture. It's the bad thing about all this long hair. So we're bringing in the idea that culture and gender need to be considered when you think about bounded rationality. And it needs to be considered in a very explicit manner, not just, oh yeah, we're in a different country and that's what matters, right? And it's so fascinating to me because these women are making suboptimal financial decisions because in the culture that they exist in, they cannot be financially more successful than their husbands. And so, and they're perfectly aware of having made that choice. They're perfectly aware that they're making suboptimal financial decisions. I mean, they're really aware of what they're doing. And I think this is kind of a fascinating thing. I think our views that we have on rationality, on business, on making money, on all these things, they're very much a Western view of the world. They're very much an American view of the world. They're very much, very much a US view of the world. They're very much a European view of the world in some ways. And so I think there's a lot of different ways of thinking about rationality when we think about business. China, to some extent, is doing the same thing, right? We always thought, oh, you had to be, democratic and you had to have this democracy and this and that, and the Chinese seem to be doing something a little bit different. And so I think these are questions that are so fascinating. And I think it's time, so IB research in some ways took a lot of strategy questions and applied it in the international context. And I think that was fine because, well, it had to be fine because that's how they made progress and that was what they did. And much of the scholarship is wonderful. But I think it's time for IB research to embrace who they are and what they can bring to the table. And maybe they're already doing this and I'm late to the party, but it just seems to me like the things that I'm learning, that I'm seeing, that I'm understanding from some of the work that I've even done, and I'm a dabbler in this area. I think it's just fascinating, and I think it's profound, and it has profound things to say about our theories. You know, I hear people talk about these indigenous theories, and I tend to not like it when I hear this stuff because I think that sort of means we just don't know. We don't like the theories that, you know, are Western theories, and so we just want to come up with some other theory. But it seems to me like there's so much to learn by really taking our theories and really understanding how they fit in these different cultures, really understanding how they fit in terms of gender, really understanding the world, not just kind of applying them willy-nilly, but trying to really get some understanding. That's just my thoughts.
Sharon, what's next for you in research? What's the next step?
So a couple things. You know, I am loving the stuff on these women in Ghana. And again, because I think we truly don't understand the choices that people make through the lenses that they have. And, you know, if you look at business, especially entrepreneurship, if you look at like immigration, if you look at women, I mean, those are huge chunks of the entrepreneurial businesses. And we sort of do this, right? We sort of wave it all away because we're so interested in, technology and how do we commercialize these technologies so that we make money and this and that. And so I don't know, right now I'm very fascinated with these different views of our theories, right? And this fits in with the creation stuff. Right? It fits in with the creation stuff so nicely because that's what these people are doing. They're out creating their lives and they're shaping their lives and they're shaping their lives of their children and they're shaping their lives of their environment. And we don't understand these questions. Not really. And even in the US, I'm working on another paper with a postdoc that I have working with me, and she is looking at stereotypes and beliefs in a just world. It's a bias actually, and how we judge failure in entrepreneurship, right? And so we've actually gone through 4 states, and I think we're probably going to expand this, but we look at non-minority entrepreneurs, we look at African-American entrepreneurs, and we look at immigrant entrepreneurs. And we look at how their failures, their business failures, which in entrepreneurship, everybody's like, oh, it's a badge of honor, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? If you're an African-American entrepreneur, it is not a badge of honor. And if you're an immigrant to this country, it is even worse, even worse. And I just find that really fascinating because I always felt like entrepreneurship was sort of the great leveler in some ways, right? So you see people immigrate to this country who maybe don't have a lot of skills necessarily, and they go into entrepreneurship and they're able to make things go. They have a small grocery store. The Jewish population in New York, for example, many of them that came over started tailor shops, right? And we see this and we see how they're able to become part of society and we see how they're able to make things better for the next generation. I don't know. I don't know if I think that's true anymore, or if it's true for the current set of immigrants that are coming into this country. I don't know, but I think it's an interesting question, and I'd like to find out the answer.
Yes, thank you. The third part about advice and mentoring. Who was your advisor? Who was your mentor?
Well, those are two different questions, right? So my advisor was Dale Meyer. When I did my PhD at the University of Colorado, Boulder. Dale was my chair. And Dale was a really scrappy individual. He's still alive. He's not doing well. I'm sorry to hear that. And I suspect Dale must be in his 80s by now, somewhere in his 80s. But he, just a very scrappy individual, was an entrepreneur himself, and had made a lot of money. So this was in the 80s, I think. I think he had sold his business for 10 million or something. So that was not an insignificant amount of money. And so then he came back to his academic career. He had taken a leave of absence, and he came back and you know, really funded entrepreneurship research at University of Colorado. He really is the reason that the people that graduated from there. And then in terms of mentor, it has to be Jay, right? Jay Barney. I learned so much from Jay. I can't even say how much I learned from Jay. And so they're two separate questions, right? They're two separate answers.
Okay, Sharon. What was the best advice you received from your mentor?
Work on what you love.
Okay. What are the most common mistakes or most common issues, problems that you see among the junior faculty or PhD students that you say, okay, fix these things so that you don't have to suffer through the program? What are those?
So I think it's two things, and they're related and not related. But one thing that I've been really taken aback by is the lack of understanding of the literature and the theories. And, you know, it's like you have to learn the basics. You just have to learn the basics, and you need to be good at the basics. And, you know, and I'm not so sure that I was great at it either when I was a doctoral student, but I certainly, as an assistant professor, I had to go back and figure it out, and they will too. So it's, you know your theories, and you don't have to know everything, but in fact, it's better if you don't know everything, but get 3 or 4 of them that you really, really know and understand well. And then the flip side of that is, then you have to be creative, right? So what I'll see the really creative students don't understand the basics and don't understand the theories, or the ones that understand the theories love them so much that they can't see what's wrong with them or where the holes are, and they're not creative enough to be able to go on and publish interesting work, right? So you see the two pieces, and I wish we could marry everybody, right? That it's like you have to have both in order to have a career in this business. You know, I always hear, oh, this person's so smart or that person's so smart. Yeah, I don't care, right? Everybody's smart when you get to this level. There's no stupid people at this level. There really aren't. There may be some socially not so bright people, right? But intellectually, nobody's stupid at this level. Everybody's very smart. So it has to be smart plus something else. And it can be smart plus creative. It can be smart plus hardworking. It can be smart plus, you know, whatever. But smarts alone doesn't get you anywhere in this business because everybody's smart. That's parity.
Sharon, you work very hard. I mean, you worked very hard. You reached the top. You were very successful. What is the resource or capability that a junior faculty PhD students should be striving to get to accumulate? What's the practice?
Yeah, so I think, again, it's kind of both those things. I think, you know, and I have to be careful because I don't want to be one of those old people that says, oh, I walked to school in 10 feet of snow, right? But I do feel like it's some of that, right? There's some students, and I'm not painting a brush on everybody, but it's like they have to be hungry. You have to work hard. You have to be hungry. You know, one of the things, and there's downsides to this, but one of the things, you know, I did not grow up in a wealthy family. We weren't poor by any means, but we weren't wealthy. And my parents worked very hard. And so one of the things that I learned very early on was you have to work hard and you have to strive. And I don't see that as much today. I don't see that you have to work hard and you have to strive in many of our students. And that makes me a little nervous because I think, well, where are you going to go if you don't work hard and strive? Now, the flip side of that is, right, is you also don't know how to appreciate. So after you work hard and you strive and you get to a certain place, you don't know how to appreciate that you're there, right? So sometimes I'll sit there and I'm like, I work harder as an endowed chair than I did as an assistant professor. What's wrong with this story, right? You know, where did I miss out on this boat? And Asla, your wife actually said to me, she said this to me a couple of years ago. She goes, enjoy your success. And that was so profound because she's so correct. I need to just sort of enjoy my success. It's okay. I'm going to always have lots of papers. I have lots of projects. I have lots of things I want to do. I need to really enjoy my success. And she gave me this profound insight.
Last question for the sake of time. What is one question that I should have asked you but haven't?
So I don't know that you should have asked me, but I've seen some of your videos that you had put together. And a topic that came out is kind of this balance, this work-life balance thing. And I actually have an opinion on that. So I don't know if it's a question or if it's an opinion. I don't think it exists. I think anyone who talks about work-life balance just isn't very successful at anything, right? So, and that's my opinion. So anyone who's seen this, don't get mad at me, right? Don't hate me because I said that. Just, you know, it's my opinion. But successful people have no balance. They really don't. And it doesn't matter what you're successful at, right? You can be whatever you choose to be successful at. You could be successful at saving the homeless, right? Mother Teresa, look at what balance did Mother Teresa have, right? And she's going to be a saint, right? So truly successful people, I don't think have any balance in their lives. They're successful because that's what they do. They're all their life goes into one thing. And so and I think that's important. And I think once you realize that, in fact, it's funny because I had this conversation with a friend of mine who is a pediatric urologist, actually very famous surgeon. And when I told him what I was thinking about, he said to me, he goes, you sound like my mother. He goes, my mother used to always tell me that successful people have no balance, right? So I don't know if it's a question, but that's my opinion on that.
That was interesting. Instead of saying work-life balance, I would ask work-life compromise. Maybe that is a better approach. Sharon, I learned a lot from this conversation. Thank you. This was
thank
perfect.
you.
And I'm sure the audience will agree with me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.